Welcome to Bring Out Your Badass Self, a movement to break your negative thoughts and habits and instead focus on building each other up and encouraging fearless authenticity.
Each week, we will get vulnerable and share experiences alongside our guests and audience. Come rediscover your inner badass self.
Good morning, badass.
Good morning, badass. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing well. I am a little sleepy, but I am good. I didn't sleep the best, but
Oh, no.
that's okay. I had some really good nights of sleep this week, though. So,
Oh, good.
yeah. So that's good. Good.
I'm looking out. I'm shiny today. I'm like looking, at how shiny I am.
Maybe it's just light coming at you.
I have a lot of light on me. I probably
Yeah.
should reduce it just a little bit, but
Is it nice there? Is it
it
sunny?
is. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little cloudy today, but it's actually been really nice weather lately.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Warm.
Yeah. So we already have people joining us. Good morning, fellow badasses. Please let us know and say hello and let us know that you are here. And so, Cate, I'm excited about today's show. I think
Yeah.
it's just going to be a really good conversation. And I don't know, I feel like it's also very timely in sort of where the world is to maybe try to help people view things a little bit beyond their views of the world, maybe.
Yeah. Outside of their little bubble of people like them or worlds like, environment like them.
Yeah. So I see several people joining us. Just let us know that you are here. And so Tanya, good morning.
Good
She's
morning,
letting us know
Tanya.
she's here. So welcome, Tanya. So glad you're here. And so, Cate, maybe we should just jump on into it. I don't know. So I know we still have some more people joining us. Jenna, good morning. Can't get StreamYard to work. And so Facebook isn't working, but thank you for letting us know you're here today.
Yeah.
Mara,
Good morning, loves.
Aw. And so, Cate, also real quick, so today's show was supposed to be Pardeep Kalika. So
Yeah.
however, he had a little bit of conflict, so we ended up switching, and so we're going to have him on March 29th, which actually I think is going to be very complimentary to today's conversation.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be awesome. Pardeep is going to give us a fantastic show. We're going to speak a lot about ending hate, and yeah, it connects to a variety of different labels, right?
It does. And then next week, can you believe it? It's going to be 1 year.
It's crazy. It feels like it just started.
Oh my God.
I mean, like, yeah, I can't even believe it. So that's crazy. 50-ish episodes. Like, what?
Yeah. I know. This is our 50th episode, by the way. This one today.
It's 50 episodes.
Today is 50 episodes. And so next week will be 51 because we only took off 1 week in the entire year. And that was at the end of the year.
Yep.
And so
that's pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of that.
Good morning. She's joining us from YouTube.
Good morning, J-Ro.
Yeah. J-Ro. I love that label. Oh, all right. So, Cate, let's just jump into it. So today we're going to be talking about labels. And at first I thought I might just start a little bit by a definition of what a label is. And so whenever I looked it up, it said it's a way to define identity and sum up a feeling, state, attitude, or behavior. And so, Cate, when you think about the earliest time in your life, what labels were you given as a child? And I want to know this for the audience too. So in the earliest time of your life, what were some of the labels that you were given?
Yeah. And I personally find this, it's with my childhood trauma, it's like mixed up, and hard for me to like remember. I have a bad memory, but I remember I remember inside my family being called bossy, like
Mm.
bossy was always a thing. And I also remember hearing pretty all the time, externally, internally. Those are my earliest memories of, labels.
Yeah. For me, I think they were talkative girl. Who would imagine?
Yeah.
And then also athlete, so athletic, because I was super athletic. I loved sports, and I just remember almost any sport that I tried, except for tennis, which I ended up finally becoming really good at later on in life. All sports came super easy to me.
Yeah.
So I remember those were probably maybe even Tom girl.
Yeah.
So were some of the other labels.
I got tomboy a lot too.
Yeah.
So I
The
had,
tomboy, yeah.
but it was like a little later that it was more tomboy. But I
Mhm.
can remember, hearing that a lot about my physical appearance, and then and then bossy,
Mhm.
and in my little brain, like it correlated to like, oh, because I've been told I was pretty so many times. I remember thinking like a really good way to protect myself is to not be pretty. Like, so
I
I can
remember you telling
remember
me that. Yeah.
myself struggling with those with labels early on.
Mm. Well, let's think a little bit beyond ourselves, and I'd be curious for other people what some of the labels were for you. But let's think about high school. And when I think about labels, that's one of the key areas I tend to think about. And so I asked my husband, and I said, "So, in when was the first time you remember labels, in your life?" And he was like, "Probably middle school." And I said, "What were some of those labels?" And he was like, well, there were the rednecks, there were the preppy people, there were the jocks, there were the nerds, there were the band geeks. And I added in the smokers because that was one of the other things within our high school. But if you think about it, I was asking my daughter this the other day. They have different names, but it's ultimately the same type of
Is it?
thing. So it's like emo instead of the smokers, you know?
Right.
So
Right. The emo crowd.
yeah, exactly. And then
Mhm.
the wannabes is, I think one of the other ones that she has. And so she had all kinds of different types of labels. And so I found it so interesting that it was starting. And
Yeah.
up until this point, I don't feel like she didn't really label people. Like
Hmm.
we were very um I was very deliberate to not say labels. So even whenever I would explain a black person, I wouldn't say the word black. I would say, well, what do they look like? So I would ask her to describe the person versus giving her the label of, are they black? So things like
Hmm.
that. Like I was very conscientious. I didn't want her to start labeling people. And it's funny now she's already in without us. And I'm like, okay, so here it starts.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I remember most of those labels from my like high school journey. The one I would add is because I was a debater. So we had a debate group.
Hmm.
I don't remember us having rednecks. I do remember some of the terms being like totally inappropriate. Like I wouldn't even like I remember one that rhymed with the N word, but it was
Ooh.
for, people of white skin that were interested in hip hop in the 90s, because it was fairly
Oh,
like in the 80s and 90s. I remember that. Um, I remember there was a division between the drivers and the bussers. It was like a class division in our high school. So like
exactly.
those that drove had more money,
Mm.
because and now I don't think it's that way, but then it was a big deal at our high school to have your own car and be parking in the lot.
Yeah. So I I think you're starting to hit upon some real important social labels. So when we think about social labels, those are really personality traits that are given to a group, and we're used to these. So for example, there's race, ethnicity, there's sex, there's gender, there's some of the things you just talked about, the socioeconomic status. So the rich, the poor, there's also age, religion, and then you get into disabilities and things like that. And so, when I'm just going to ask the audience. So think about our shirts. They have rainbows on it. So were we automatically labeled whenever people saw us? Were they thinking, oh, well, one of them, this was the first time they joined, they'd be like, oh, someone's gay, or they support the gay, the
Right.
LGBTQ,
Yep.
community. And so think about that. That's really what we're talking about, is when you see someone, you're automatically categorizing them.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. It's I would be interested to hear from everyone, like if you did have a label in mind, or like when you first came in to our show, if you didn't know us prior, what you kind of thought, and then also, how do you label yourself today? I think that's like super interesting. Also, like, how do others label you? Like we talked a little bit about that in our childhood, like, because
Yeah.
growing up, you don't necessarily have a label for yourself, right? When you're a kid, you're just like, I'm Cate, or I'm
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. But then you all of a sudden, people start labeling you, and that becomes something that you are identifying with in one way or another, or, accepting because that's what you're being told. But it's really all about those social labels. Um, they're not about our personality traits. Some of them are literally about things that we can't control. Like I can't control that I'm white.
Yeah.
That's my race.
Well, so I'm
Or my
curious, Cate, so if you think about your labels, or maybe rather the way you would describe yourself, either way you want to do it, what are the things that stand out to you, that would define you?
in terms of how I would label myself.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely as a woman, a female, a wife. I use that to describe myself because my partnership with Jenna is like so important to everything I do, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm a mom, I'm a provider, I'm a couple of different types of moms. I've been a foster mom, I'm an
Mm.
adoptive mom, you know, um, we have like, so that's a topic that's regular in our household. So we have those labels around.
Mhm.
Entrepreneur, cold caller extraordinaire.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
my
say.
Yes, that's one of my favorite labels that I've given myself. Progressive, I do like to label myself as a progressive. I try to stay away from political things, but I like to think that I'm progressive.
Mhm.
Lesbian, badass,
Mhm.
witch, with voodoo and like other things that we like to do.
Uh-huh.
ADHD, BPD, borderline. Italian's been a big label I use.
Mhm.
Hard worker.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are the
Yeah.
ones that I kind of would label myself.
Yeah.
What about you? What would be your labels?
Yeah, I of course I feel like everybody defaults to gender right off the bat. And so like I'm a female, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm also a bonus mom. And
Right.
so like you, I have also two labels related to mom. I'm also an executive, although I would think also an entrepreneur as well.
Hmm.
Uh, I also love astrology, so I'm a Scorpio.
Yeah.
Uh, I also consider myself a problem solver, intuitive, a connector. I'm also big into being sex positive because of
Right.
the experiences that I went through. I consider myself assertive. Uh, and then whenever I think about things that other people say about me, things that they've said are confident, that I come across as confident, that's a
Mhm.
label given to me. I've also been told that I'm very self aware, and I had to think about that one. I was like, okay. They were like, you know who you are. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true. I think you do.
yeah, and then, I've been called some not so nice names, labels. I've been called a bitch and a cunt, in the past.
Yeah.
And then, I've been told by a lot of people, even people that really know me, as intimidating. And
Yeah.
so, which I think is weird, in some ways, because they're like, I don't know why I feel like you're intimidating. And to me, as I started to dive into it, I realized that the intimidating is more about them than it was about me,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, because I think it's the confidence that they're seeing. But I even have someone that I'm very, very close to. And she's someone that actually works at our company, but I've known her since middle school. I was best friends with her in middle school. And she told me that I'm intimidating. And I'm just like, what? And she's like, you've never done anything to make me really feel that way, but that's just how I feel. But I've had lots of other people say that as well. And then the other
Yeah.
one, I would say competitive. A lot of people do feel like I'm very competitive. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people they kind of use those labels that I label myself. A lot of
mhm,
people have labeled me that way. Um, I have been, I mean, I'm sure I've been called names. I don't
mhm.
really remember, but I do know that people have called me wild, or kind of crazy, right?
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, the tattoo on the back of the head,
right,
come on.
right,
That's a little
reckless, a little
crazy.
reckless. I've been called even irresponsible. I've been called irresponsible
Oh,
because of just taking chances that people wouldn't take.
hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we start to think about those labels, sometimes they can be helpful, and
Right.
there can be benefit to them. So, when I think when they provide a clear explanation of something that we're seeking. So, for example, if we have a disease, or if we're experiencing something emotionally, or we have a disability, or, even just, some of the things that we just talked about, though labels aren't, I think a lot of times people think labels are bad, and we'll talk about that, but they can also be good because they help us to understand more about ourselves and
Mhm.
understand and categorize the things that we need to know related to our lives.
Right.
I think that it then becomes interesting, though, because those social labels end up then putting expectations on us, and that's when sometimes it can be uh, challenging. So, for example, one of them you said is ADHD or AD. Did
Mhm.
you say ADD or ADHD?
ADHD. Yep.
Okay, so when you give that label, what do people automatically start to think about you?
That I'm hyper, that I'm, um, what is the word? I don't know why it's escaping me. Impulsive, impulsive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
can't concentrate. They can't
right. Can't
focus.
focus.
When
Yeah.
in actuality, you actually can.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you
Yep.
actually can be very focused.
Yes. Yes.
And
Exactly.
so those social, labels can start to place a set of expectations on us, or things that
Right.
really a lot of times are beyond our control. Like you said, you're white, you're a female. You can't control that. Like, those things are social
Totally.
labels that are a part of who you are, and you can't really change those things.
Right. Right. And then, um, you can, so you're setting expectations on yourself, right?
Mhm.
When you are creating these labels, and but there's also expectations that you have, like, that you may not understand, are affecting you, right? Like, so it took me kind of a long time to realize that, the ADHD or the other mental health things that I struggle with,
Mhm.
had great sides to them, that
Yeah.
had really, really productive, awesome sides that I could embrace as well. But,
Yeah.
it's you have to kind of read between the lines of the label or change the way you view it, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Because those expectations that someone's going to be a particular way, or think about some of the other labels that we may give. So within your label you said lesbian.
Mhm.
So as an example, if we use that as an example of one of your labels, are there then expectations that people within your society expect you to act like? I'm
Right.
expecting you to be loyal to us. And the moment you aren't loyal to us or you do something that our group doesn't feel is acceptable, what happens to you?
Yeah, exactly. You're like ostracized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't what happens when the things that you can't control, like gender or race or sexual orientation, end up feeling wrong, right?
Hmm.
Like we could go into a whole conversation about transgender or two-spirited people, you
Yeah.
know, that's a whole set of harsh expectations that a person has on themselves based on something they can't control. And changing the label may help them.
Yeah.
It may not.
Yep. And so really, it's labels really put us in a box.
Mhm.
Labels for me are very related to one of our past shows, which is about black and white thinking. Like,
Mm.
you are this, so therefore, this is who you are. This is what I see. And I think that it's dangerous. It can be very dangerous to think that. But so, as an example, I invited one of my family members to come watch a show, and you don't know this. I reached back out, asked them how they liked the show, and they didn't like the fact that you were cussing. I think also they didn't like the fact that you said you were gay.
Mhm.
And so, based on my experience with them and some of the other things that they have said, but my hope was that they would join the show and see that you are a religious person, you are a spiritual person, and we were
Mhm.
bringing on a spiritual person onto the show, but they immediately labeled you as someone that is not good in heart and also not someone that was acceptable to their religious beliefs. And
Right.
so when we start to label people and disregard all the other things, yes, Kate cusses. Yes, Kate is a lesbian. But I said to her, I said, well, Kate is a very actually open-hearted person and a pretty amazing person. And I'm sorry that you didn't feel like you were able to see that side of her.
Yeah, that is too bad.
Yeah.
But that is the limitation of that box, right? So,
Yep.
there's a group of, people that fall into a certain religion that feel, that those that are not heterosexual, don't belong,
Yep.
right? And that closes you out to a whole lot of people that might have other great qualities to them that
Yeah.
you're not going to see.
Yeah. And so we've been talking about social labels, so how
Mhm.
society labels us. But there's another part of this. There's identity labels, and we started to talk about this a little bit. But labels are how we identify things, and we use them really to put things in a group, but get a sense of who our identity is. And so I'm
Right.
going to pull this
And
up.
sometimes
So
just to describe ourselves, right? It's like,
exactly.
or, like that compartmentalization makes it easier for someone else to digest, we think.
Yep, exactly. And so I'm going to pull this up. So I found this was personal identity examples, and I don't know if you guys can see it. I know it's rather small, but these were all of the different identity examples that I had found. And so let's think about one of them. For example, you said cold caller extraordinaire. So
Yeah.
let's think about, for example, so you guys can quickly take a look at this, but I just wanted to quickly show this, but let me come back to this. So let's say that my identity is wrapped up in who I am from a business perspective.
Right.
So you're cold caller extraordinaire, Cate,
Right.
and that is how you see yourself, and that is how you define yourself. Well, what happens if you're then fired?
Right.
What happens to that identity that you have wrapped yourself up in, that this is who you are and you're nothing else?
Right. And then I lose the job, but I also, it's not just a job at that point. It's connected to this part of my identity. So I'm losing part of myself, right? Because I'm a little lost now. I've lost my job and I'm no longer the cold caller extraordinaire that I thought I was, or that I, always identified with.
Yeah. And I'll say that this also happens when we go through divorce
Yeah.
or we go through the loss of a child. If our label in the world is I'm mom, like that is who I am. And I don't have any other label that I really, I might have like little things here and there, but like my whole life is wrapped up in being mom, or my whole life is wrapped up in being a wife. When those things happen, our husband, or our wife cheats on us, and now all of a sudden we're going through a divorce, and that is the identity that we were so connected to. That's how we identified. It
Right.
then ends up impacting our overall identity, and it makes us, it makes a risk of ourself.
Right.
Self, the capital S, as Deborah Lukovich would say. And so she says S, capital self, of like who our identity, who we are.
I would be interested to ask our audience, are there things that you over identify with, in your identity? Like, I know for Jenna, you're watching, I know that there have been times where you've thought, I'm a mother, and this is like all I've ever wanted, and it's what I'm really good at, and that nurturing is such a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think there are times when you did wonder if you were kind of over identifying as that.
Yeah.
I know for me, there are times when I over identify with being a provider, where I'm so narrowly focused on providing for my family, that I forget to take care of myself, that, that I forget to, take just a few moments for me, like where it was to the point for many years where every time I had some free time, I was like, okay, well, time to get some more things off of that to-do list, for work,
Mm-hmm.
like with zero hobbies,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Are there any things you have over identified with in the past related to your identity?
It's interesting. I've always felt like a little bit of a chameleon. And whenever people describe me, they always say I'm like an onion. Like the more they peel back, the more they learn about me. I feel like I'm all over the place. Like I'm not one thing. And I was even like this in high school. Like I was an athlete, but I was also in the choir. I was also a part of theater. I was a part of, I was a leader. I was a leader of the, I can't remember what the society, or the National Society of Honor Society. And so, so I was a lot of different things in high school. And I feel like I've always been that. Like I like so many different things. That I don't attach to just one thing. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool. Ooh, this is
Mm,
cool." Like I attach to different things at different times, but I still see that I like pull from all of those things.
that's wonderfully well-rounded, and very chameleon-ish. Like it's pretty cool, right? That you can just kind of
Yeah.
meld in.
And well, so when we think about those types of things and our self-identity, think about when we were growing up, and if someone had labeled us, let's say bossy, for example, was one of the things that you had. What if you latched onto that and you're just like, all right, I'm going to be bossy, I'm going to boss everyone around? But think about people that get labels of you're a loser,
Right.
you're ugly. If it hadn't been pretty and instead it was ugly, or people that have addictions, you're an addict.
Mhm.
People that are fat, you're fat. And then
Yeah.
that becomes their identity that's added into their psyche, and how it is that it then starts to impact them, that label impacts them. And so a lot of times it's figuring out where that label originated from as well.
Yeah, and this is giving me all sorts of things to think about that I even in preparation I wasn't thinking about. But like
Uh-huh.
I have a brother. He's an alcoholic. I say that almost every time I talk about him.
Oh, wow.
Except it except to people who know him. If I'm talking to
Mhm.
my dad, I refer to him as my name as his name, talking to Jenna. But
Mm.
like, if I'm talking to him about him, if I'm even telling a story about him, even if it's a positive one, I will toss, he's an alcoholic.
Oh,
Like that's
wow.
his main label for me,
Yeah.
and there's so much more to him than that. Yeah, that's a huge part of who he is because it's all consuming, but he's more than an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly. And so imagine that label that you're giving him. He's then saying, okay, well, and I don't know if you say this in front of him or if you're just saying it to other people, but if he were to hear that, he's then hearing, oh, well, see, I am an alcoholic. This is the label I'm given. This is just who I am.
He does own it and uses it, and I do say it in front of but he's an odd alcoholic in that way. He owns
Yeah.
it. He's very accountable to it. But
Okay.
if anything, I think it would help him more. Like maybe he's too over identifying with it himself. Like Tim, you are
Yeah.
more than an alcoholic, right?
Right.
You know,
So what are some of the other labels you would give him?
smart,
Hmm.
super smart. He's a dad, and he's a pretty good dad despite being an alcoholic,
Get rid of the alcoholic. Just
I'm
focus
just
on.
saying he
I
manages
know.
that aspect fairly well.
So I'm the type of person that the moment you start to give those labels to people and you continue to say it in the universe, you're
Yeah,
just
you're right.
continuing that vibe. Like that's who that person's going to be. Maybe
Right.
adding recovering alcoholic,
Right.
or I am a person who happens to maybe drink too much,
Mhm.
something along those lines. But I get that is something, but that in a lot of ways that almost becomes the excuse, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And it becomes, right, exactly. And it wraps a whole nother context around the entire thing, right?
It
Because
does.
he becomes more than that.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, you are going exactly where I wanted to go as far as labels. So the moment we use it to define
mhm,
versus describe, isn't that really the issue?
that is it, right? So and we kid ourselves into believing that we're describing, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, I feel as though I am a very kind and loving person and
You are.
and super empathetic. But here's this thing that I've been doing for years and years and years. I've been just minimizing him down to like this one thing, and it's such a big thing, right? Because it's so ever present and he isn't in recovery, and he is in a constant battle. And so it does feel very much in your face, but he is more than that, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that is a hard thing to swallow at times, especially if you've described and defined yourself in a certain way.
Yeah. So let's think about things that how a lot of times we define ourselves, versus how we describe ourselves. So one of the things that I am finding on Facebook, for example, is we are becoming much more isolated from people that don't share our labels.
Right.
And we are really sorting ourselves into categories, and we're choosing not to associate, and we're choosing to isolate ourselves from those that don't adhere to our labels. And that really, we're only coming out really from like behind that keyboard when we feel safe to sort of go yell at them and get on to them for not being a part of our label,
Yeah.
and then, we then retreat back to our echo chamber.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because, it it really ends up being not about division at that point, right? So
Mhm.
you are dividing and conquering. You're trying so hard to control the environment
Mhm.
that you have, right? So if I'm scrolling in a Facebook feed and I see something that someone posted that I don't like, oh my God, that is
Mhm.
unacceptable. It is, there's no, I want to control that. I have the ability now. I can
Mhm.
say, click, no, I don't want to see this shit. I can do that with anything I want online these days, right? It's giving us this like false sense of control over something that really in the in the big realm of things isn't really making us safe at all.
Yeah. And when we think about it, this is something I just learned here recently, and it blew my mind. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's it. And so, one of the things that I heard recently was from a guy who is a former CIA person. And I sent it to my group
Yeah.
to listen to. But one of the things he talked about is that the CIA actually teaches people to look at understand the difference between perception versus perspective. And
Yeah.
so, perception is the way we think about things and understand something, but it's really based on our five senses, it's our emotions. But perception, we hear the term perception is reality. We hear that a lot, and I've even said that. But really, it's the perception is the lens that we choose to look at reality through.
Right.
And so, and that's based on our past experiences, that's based on our feelings, our thoughts, but it
Yeah.
goes back to the emotions. I feel this way. I have this perception of things because of a past experience or because I felt this way before.
Right. Right. It's perception can be based on things out of your control as well, right? Like so it has to do with your thoughts and the way that you are viewing things,
Yes.
but it also, a person can perceive the same situation completely different as someone else, and it's because they are coming from their environment, their worldview, you
Yes.
know, and in a lot of ways they don't know it. That's who they are, right? They don't know that they're perceiving it differently than someone else,
Yeah.
right?
And
Because
even
that's
when and even when someone gives us feedback, like within our company, one of the things I try to tell people is keep in mind that their perception isn't right or wrong. It is simply how they view it.
yes, right,
And your perception isn't right or wrong. It is simply how you're viewing it. The problem
right,
is we're not viewing it by our being we're doing it through uh pers- perspection, or is that right? I'm confusing the two.
perception,
Perception, thank you. Perception versus perspective. So once we do perspective, so the best way that I can describe it is, let's say I have a monocle on and I'm viewing everything through that monocle. That's perception. The moment I start to view it through Kate's eyes or someone else's eyes, I'm now viewing it through their perspective. And so perspective is really the angle or the direction in which a person looks at a particular object. And so the way you view something is completely different than how I might view something.
Right.
When I'm willing to look at how you view things, I now have a much larger lens to be able to look at things from.
Right. Right. When you look at a perspective, you are looking at it through a different, your lens for the perspective is more open-minded, it's more based in empathy, where your perception is really vulnerable to bias, right? Like,
Exactly.
So it's like how, what happens with racism sometimes, right?
Mhm.
So, and then there are people who have taken, and we all know what racism is, but then there are people who have decided that they don't like racism, and they have taken, steps to kind of educate themselves and understand what happens to the other people's race, right?
Yeah.
That's recognizing that they may have a bias, and that's opening themselves up to other perspectives.
Yeah. And I'll give a very heated example of this is that as a white person, I don't necessarily know all of the things that a Black person goes through. I can try to have a perspective by listening to that person and understanding their views, doing research and understanding how it is that they deal with things. Vice versa, on the other side of it, whenever we were dealing with a lot of the police and, Black shootings and things like that, people also don't necessarily understand what it's like to be a cop.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think
Right.
that whole back and forth is that neither side was really understanding the perspective of each person. I was sitting there going, I can see how Black people feel the way that they feel because they are taught that they should be that when they see a cop, you better have your hands up, you better obey, or you're going to get shot, because that is their perspective. That doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong. That is simply their perspective. I also know what the cop feels because I've actually interned with a police department. The cop feels I constantly have to be on guard. I have to choose my judgment. And a lot of times their judgment has been this view, their perception, their experience, their emotions, their feelings have been, whenever I've experienced this type of person, this is what has happened. So that starts to shade how it is that they're thinking about things. But the other side also doesn't understand the danger that that type of person also experiences on a day-to-day basis. So neither side is taking the moment to understand the bigger perspective in how each side actually feels about things. They're only looking at it through their own perception.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and I see how dangerous that can be, right? If like, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So if we could go back in time and expose each group to each other's perspective, it would totally
Yes.
help, right? Unfortunately, the perspective and that entire issue is built on a level of systemic and historical racism that is so deep.
Agreed.
It's so complicated. It's so hard for us to do.
So hard.
Yeah, so it's super hard to go and look at those issues, but at its root, it is about perspective. If we could open ourselves up to really truly understand how deep it is and how far back it goes, and understand each other's, point of view.
Agreed. And that takes a lot of strength from someone and a lot of control to be able to go in and say, I'm not going to immediately start judging one side or the other. I'm going to simply sit back and try to understand. And isn't that half of the challenges that we're having in today's society, is that we're labeling people, the liberal snowflakes, the Republican KKK, think about all of the labels that we're allowing to be placed upon people. And we are even potentially placing upon people.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we can get into there's labels that are based on pure hatred, right? And then there's labels. So there's a difference between the ones that are like just completely hate based, right? Versus the labels that may serve in some other way, or like there's the harm, the harm that those do are completely different.
Agreed. And again, that goes back to how we define ourselves. Are we describing ourselves as this, or are we defining ourselves as this? So I'm going to give you an example. This is a work example. And so let's say that Cate gives a colleague a call and they're in their car. And she's like, oh, they're not at their desk. She calls them a couple days later. They're in their car. They're not at the desk. She calls them a couple of days later. They're in the car, not at their desk. So Cate's like, wow, this person is never at their desk. Like, what are they even doing? And so she's automatically starting, because of her experience, that the last 3 times she's called them, they're not at their desk. She now has this perception that this person isn't probably doing their job. They might be lazy. She could be giving them all kinds of different types of labels. When in actuality, she may then find out, had she had taken the time to really talk to them, that this person has a particular time in the day. They go take care of their child. They pick them up. And she just happened to be calling them at the same time each day at that particular time, when in actuality, they're also working late and actually working more hours. But that's the only interaction that Cate has had with this person. And so we start to make judgments based on those small little pieces of information and connections that we have with people.
Right. Yep. And it happens. I mean, so that kind of simple example of, you making a judgment based on the experience you're having. That one doesn't cause maybe, total harm. You can be like, that person gets promotion maybe, and you're like, what? They barely work, right? And so you're frustrated. Different. That's different than, somebody saying, well, I can't at all accept you if you are gay. Or, I have experienced a lot of Black crime. So as a police officer, when I see a Black person, I assume that he or she is a criminal, right? That's far more dangerous. But it's the same thing. So I wonder if, just like everything, if we can break it in our day-to-day,
yes,
right? If we can start small and break that habit with the little things, with the judgments that we all make on a day-to-day basis, will it give us the skills to come together and tackle some of these much larger issues, that are really based on where the judgment turns into hate and the hate turns into fatalities, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to play this video that we created, and I debated on whether I should narrate it or not. So I think I will, just to be able to add so I can read it for people. So I created this little video. What we want to do is have you look at each image. And as you look at each image, think about the labels that you may associate just by looking at the person. So keep that in mind as you are taking a look at this. So, what labels do people assign to you? Labels can open doors. Labels can define who you are. Labels can lead to judgment. Labels can inspire or confine us. Labels can empower or limit us. In a world filled with labels, the true measure of a person lies beyond what can be seen. And so I created that video just to be able to help people think that the moment you saw some of those people, we might automatically within our minds associate certain labels to them. Like the first person was a CEO. That could be a label that I gave that person. Someone else might give something different.
Right. Yeah. Like I noticed she had a little tattoo that was peeking out of her suit. You know, so somebody else could say, well, maybe that would be a CEO, but I bet it, you know, they wouldn't have a tattoo showing, you know, based on their limited, you know, perception of, you know, what a CEO looks like.
Yep. And then the second person, we might automatically assign a transgender
Right.
to them or a cross-dresser or something along those lines. So we're immediately thinking, what about that person?
Right.
What do we associate with those types of labels?
Yeah, exactly.
And then the third person was actually an artist.
Yeah.
But we could be looking at that thinking, oh man, this is a criminal.
This is a hoodlum, a tagger. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the last person, we might have negative feelings maybe about men, or a particular ethnicity of a man may have hurt us. And so maybe we immediately think, oh man, this guy's a player.
Right. Right.
Or we might think, oh, this guy's sexy.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And so we start to give people these labels. So, Cate, what I want to focus on now is how do we move beyond labels? What is it that we need to think about when we start to become aware that we're labeling things? How can we start to loosen their hold on us and basically it's releasing the bias and really challenging our thoughts?
Right. So, you know, and this happens all over the place. So you can have been in a damaging relationship and that person, you know, as you're departing has said, you know, you're crazy, or I don't want to be, you know, I can't be with you because you're fucking nuts or whatever, you know, and there could come a time where you're like, is that true? Am I this person? You know, where you're questioning that.
I think that's so important. So think about some of the things that we may have been. We may have been an addict. We may have been manipulative. We may have been a bitch. We may have been.
Yeah, we may have been abusive in the past without, you know, we may have been a bad, you know, made bad decisions. We may have been a bad parent, you know, all of us have been at times.
But the question is this label currently true?
Right. I say no, because every single second you have an opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself. Right. But, you know, and you have to then question, where am I getting this from? Is this from me? Was this external? Is it both? right?
Mhm.
That's when it gets dangerous. I was told I was this. I believe
Mhm.
it. I think I am. I don't
Mhm.
like that. I don't like that about myself, right? But it is what I am. You know, you have that kind of attitude, and then what's motivating you to change? What's motivating you to get rid of something you don't like? There isn't really much determination that you'll find to get rid of it because you've already accepted it.
Yeah. Well, think about some labels that we may have been given, and was it even true? Like,
Right.
some people may have said, "You're ugly, you're a loser, you're whatever it may be," but were you really that? So, for example,
Right.
intimidating. I'm labeled as intimidating. Was I really ever intimidating? I don't
No.
know. I
Maybe.
don't think so.
Yeah. You never intended to be, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I was confident and opinionated. I don't really believe that I was bossy.
Mm.
I was convincing, persuasive at
Ooh,
times,
yes.
right?
And then I think it's also important to think about, okay, well, who told me this?
Right.
So if someone told you something and you associated that label, so this could be about yourself or this could be about others. So imagine that someone says, oh, that person is racist.
Mm.
We're just giving a label to them. So who is the person that told me that? Have I actually experienced that person? Have I taken the time to get to know that person, to
Mhm.
understand whether that person is really racist?
Right. You can do that with anything, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so if we're talking about this in the context of how to move beyond labels,
Mhm.
there's a couple of things there that we need, right? So one of the first thing that when you said this person is racist and you haven't experienced the racism,
Right.
so you don't, right? I can, when I put myself in that position, and I'm just being completely frank and
Yeah.
transparent here, if somebody were to say to me, so and so is racist, I would say, well, I better keep my family away from them, right?
Mhm.
That's what I would do. I would make that judgment. I wouldn't wait to see if they really are racist.
Mm.
I would do that. Now, is that the right thing to do? I don't think so. That's not really helping me understand who they are.
Mhm.
It's also not helping me a- address the situation. Um, like, I'm not fixing anything. I'm just segregating people in order to protect them from that.
Right.
It also, um, it's I can't trust, right? I can't trust that this person is accurate or not accurate.
Right.
There's just a risk there, and I get scared. So it's really fear-based more than
Yes.
anything, right? So at its root, to move beyond labels requires a lot of things, but it
Mhm.
requires, you know, these small steps we talked about earlier, like
Mhm.
to curb yourself from judging things. But then it requires trust that you can't point to and say, yeah, it's there, and it
Yeah.
requires like open-mindedness. And when you combine those things with a perceived threat,
Mhm.
how hard is that to combat your own fear and still go a step further to try to really unravel and address and understand a perspective.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being so vulnerable in sharing that, because that actually is what we need in society, is that you now are equating this. You're like, wow, so how have I been potentially impacted by labels? Someone told
Right.
me that this person's racist. I now have given them that label. That's all they are to me. Is they're racist? I shouldn't be around them. I'm not even going to give them the time of day. But
Mhm.
we're putting that person in a box. We're saying that this person, that is all that they are, when in actuality, when you set back and look from a perspective, there's probably a whole lot of other things about this person that we haven't taken the time to really understand.
Right. Right. And then I tell myself, if they really are racist, then I can, expose them to all of the things that we are,
Yeah.
our family is, right? Or the, the people of color in my family, and get them to see that there really is no room in this world for that kind of hatred, right? But I can't do that unless I'm open-minded, and yeah,
I know.
you can't change other people's views unless they want to be changed, right? The person has to want to, but you don't even get a chance if you're limiting it immediately.
Yeah. So if we're limiting it, if we're wanting people to be open about us, doesn't that also require us to be open about them?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Bridget is really good at this because she is a pastor, and she truly, not because she is, but because she truly loves everyone,
Yeah.
and so that means she has to love the criminal, she has to
Yep.
love the racist, she has to love the pedophile, the people in the world that most people are afraid of, right?
Yeah.
Emily Penton has talked about that as well.
Yes. So is the label serving us or is it harming us? Is the label serving the other person or is it harming them? That really is the crux of it, is understanding the labels we give people. Are we potentially putting that person in a box which can potentially harm that person because we're not willing to take the time to understand the other aspects of them? Are people doing that to us and they're missing out on meeting the amazing Kate Phillips because they put them in a box?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's a side to me that also is like, well, if they don't want to know me, then fuck them. And there's a side to me about the racist too, where it's like,
I know.
well, I can't change them, so that's not my problem. That's their problem. And there's only so much I can do.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Ultimately, when we think about labels, it's about overgeneralizing and stereotyping people, which then adds stigmas to them.
Right. And just like everything, if we don't have practice at it, if we don't do it regularly, if it's not a habit, it just gets worse. And that's I think a big part of this, right? Is that we allow this behavior, this habit of quick judgments to rule our perception, right?
Yes.
Instead of trying to see it from somebody else's perspective, right? But it's a habit. We do it we have to do it, and sometimes, right? You're driving, you have to, make certain decisions in a split second and make a judgment in order to be safe. You have, there's
Yep.
all sorts of things that we have to do that are quick and require very fast judgments. But do we have the ability to switch that off when it's not truly a safety concern, and allow ourselves to not make those fast judgments elsewhere?
That is the key, is slowing down and saying, okay, let me look at this and slow down my decision, because so many times we think we need to make quick decisions when in actuality, do we really? Can't we just like slow down and go, very interesting, and be more curious about the person versus immediately going on the attack with them?
Right. And then there's this whole other aspect of, we're all growing and changing and evolving, right? So the maybe racist thing I did 2 years ago,
Hmm.
is no longer who I am,
Right.
right? But the family that overheard that I was racist, 2 years ago hasn't given me the time of day, or, keeps their kids away from me because they're afraid of me, but I'm not that person anymore,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And so, how I've started to look at things, because I saw myself going down this path several years ago with the whole Trump thing.
Yeah.
And I really started to, the only people that I would actually get rid of on Facebook, I have a quite a diverse people, a group of, a list of people. But I chose to get rid of people based on how they treated me. If they weren't treating me well, then I chose that that is not something I want a part of my life. I don't care about your ideals. I don't care about the other things, but if you're not treating me with respect, that's going to be my decision on whether I'm not going to connect with you. I'm not adding a label to you. I'm just stating that you are not making
You weren't
me a
fine.
better person. So therefore, I've decided I'm not going to welcome that into my life.
Mhm.
And I'm willing to open that back up if that person is willing to show and establish trust again, that they're willing to respect me while I also continue to respect them, and hopefully they'll also see that maybe I've changed as well, as you say. But for
Mhm.
me, that really is like the criteria the lens that I look at now. How does this person treat me?
Are they
Sure.
kind? Yeah.
Exactly, because I'll tell you, my next door neighbor, her and I think completely different, but she's one of my best friends that I have, that I spend dinner with every night. But we believe completely different on so many levels, but we care about each other, we love each other, and we also respect the views that each of us have.
Yeah, but it's hard to respect things you don't like,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, it's really hard. How do you do that? How do you do that when it's not someone you love, right? You
Mm.
you work harder when it's someone you love. You work hard to say, okay, I need to respect this because I need this person in my life. I love them. My life wouldn't be my life. I need them, right? Or I want them.
Yeah. But that's also because the things we disagree on, I don't define myself by those things.
Ah, there it is, right?
And
What
so, like, I believe politically different than her, but I don't define myself by that whatsoever.
Right. But what if it was something you did define yourself by? Like that person didn't like? Like, what if it was
Mm.
like, I don't want to pick a silly thing, but what if it was, like, I don't want to say Scorpio, like, I hate Scorpios, but
I
like,
honestly don't give a shit. Someone doesn't believe in astrology? Okay,
right.
great. I'm glad,
Yeah.
maybe one day you will.
Right.
That's why the thing is that I don't equate, if they like me as a person, they either like me as a person or they
Right.
don't like me as a
Right.
person.
Yeah.
They may like some of my qualities, but maybe not all of my qualities. Isn't it sort of ridiculous that they have to accept all of me?
Right. No, it's not. You're right. You're right. Exactly. You, they don't, right? But I'm trying to think of, like, I had this great friend, and I was her only white friend. I was
Mhm.
her only white friend, and she would say that, you're my only white friend. I don't have any other white friends, and like,
Hmm.
that was a part of a label, right? I was the only white friend she had.
Yep.
And
But why? Why was that
she was
something she
afraid.
was limiting herself to?
Yeah, she was afraid.
Yeah.
She didn't believe that other white people weren't really truly racist underneath. She had had enough long
Yeah.
conversations with me to really see that I accepted my bias, that I knew, I knew who I was. I knew what my privileges were, and so she put in the work because she loved me.
Right.
But it was really hard for her to broaden that horizon for a very, very long time.
I guess the question I would have for her is, when you look at me, do you automatically think that I think less of you as a person?
Right. And she did at first. She had to learn and
I'm
see.
saying if she looked at me, like right now,
Right.
you're her only white friend. Would she then look at me that way?
I think so. I don't know that she would tell you that, but
I know, but that's the label she's giving me, is
right.
that I'm white, so therefore I don't understand anything about her. I'm not willing to learn anything about her and what it is but she is defining herself as Black. Like that is her label, and that's when we start to close ourselves off to really understanding each other.
Right. It is, and it's yeah, it is 100%. But it is also, when that part of you that someone is choosing to look past is a huge part of you,
Mhm.
that's a super difficult thing for some people to do, and it's really based in fear. So it
It is.
goes back to your point of, if we look at things through a lens of love and kindness,
Yes.
we can limit those limiting beliefs.
Yes. That's it.
That's
And that's what we've been asking other people to do, yet sometimes we don't do it ourselves and we don't even realize we're doing it ourselves.
right. Right. Yep. And
I
then you have to kind of accept it.
I love this conversation. I mean, for me, I think this went further than I was expecting. And
Yeah, I mean,
so
that was great. Yeah. And I'm slightly uncomfortable, but that's how it needs to be sometimes, right? It needs to be uncomfortable because
Mhm.
we do all have our own perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Like I am in a, you know, multiracial, uh, you know, non-normative family, we're
You are.
lesbians, there's all sorts of things there. So I come to the table with those labels and those experiences.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so the ultimate question I would like to ask everybody is, what would I be without my label?
Right. What would I be if I wasn't a provider?
Mhm.
I have no idea.
And that's really the crux of it, is the moment we define ourselves by a label, the moment that label goes away is when we start to question ourselves. And we're
Mhm.
so much more than just that
Mhm.
one label.
Right. Right. I would still be generous and loving and nurturing without, like if all of a sudden I couldn't be a provider, if I was disabled tomorrow and I couldn't work anymore and our family dynamic had to completely change, I would still be a great person.
Agreed. Because that's the Cate that I know, the Cate that
Mhm.
I fell in love with, the Cate that I have come to know. And so when we don't take the time and we immediately start to label people, then we're really losing out on potentially learning so many great things about each other.
Right.
And so our audience has been oh, you know what? I didn't even notice we had some comments. So thank you, Badass. I didn't even notice, for some reason I wasn't on this. So there were some questions or things that came in. So Maria said, I am Stardust and no one can
Ah,
take that label away from me.
oh my gosh. Okay. So for some reason, none of the things were showing up for me.
Yeah, that's so weird. They
So
all of a
like
sudden just
I didn't
showed up.
I was like, wow, we're really not
I had to click off and click back on. That's so
Me
weird.
too. So
So
we've got, that's a great comment, Maria.
it
I love
is.
that.
So Tanya said, happy 50th episode and early anniversary. Someone said she was the good girl, the quiet one. And then someone said the old soul, mature for my age, spoiled, pretty, tomboy. I wonder if that's Jenna.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We had, oh my gosh, so many.
I know. That's a great legacy to leave your kids, making them aware of labels. Someone said, Tanya said, I was everyone's little sister. I felt very undateable. Oh no. I hate that we didn't, none of these came in. And so also Maria said, digging the shirts. Good morning. Okay, so this one, the label is a blessing and a curse. I find it interesting to hear how people see me after they truly get to know me and see who I am. Then I stew on what they tell me and determine whether I really am those things. That's perfect. That's exactly it. And if so, are those labels the things I want to be? I try not to let others determine who I am. And that's beautiful. And Bruce, I'm so glad you made it. He said, good morning.
Yeah. Intimidating means you threaten something within themselves. Yeah.
All right. And then I love the song by Meredith Brooks, I'm a Bitch. Oh, yeah, I sing that one. I'm a bitch. I'm a lover. I'm a child. I'm a mother. I'm a sinner. I'm a saint. Because I think it's all a mixture of things. I like that. I think when you speak your mind and aren't afraid to speak up, you're seen as intimidating because you're going against the social expectations that women should be quiet and complacent. Be intimidating, sister.
I love it.
Maria said, I identify more and more as I am. Ooh, it's a full sentence and encapsulates anything someone else wants to call me. And Bruce said, our fears make us allergic to judgment. However, in order to understand anything, we need to make determinations. Observation, speculation, analysis, all are necessary for us to make our way in the world. Let's see. So someone said, so they missed out on the badassery of both of you every week. Sorry for them. But we're also, we're saying that they're closed-minded. Is that a label?
Right. Exactly. It is.
For me, two things are important. One is determining what needs to be said as regards to the circumstances under examination. And another is that the highest form of respect you can pay to someone is to offer them the benefit of your critical acumen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bruce.
Let's see. Tanya said, my last job was a huge part of my identity. So when I left, I had to find myself again.
Yeah, that was huge for one of our good friends.
That's great too, because you're a lifelong learner. I just watched a show about how that keeps your brain healthy and wards off dementia.
Yeah.
I used to be over-identify as a mom or a mother. In the last couple of years, I've been able to reimagine, reevaluate, and find other parts of my identity. It has been an interesting journey. I'm curious who that is.
That's Jenna, I bet.
Okay. And she said, I love that Cate is having an aha moment.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hate that these didn't come up during
I know, I was so confused.
I know. It's hard to grasp others' lived experience a lot of times, and I think people just don't bother.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going through. Okay, Maria said, for me, labels are helpful when you're discovering, I love that, who you are, but they begin to lose their wonder and awesomeness when they are used as judgment. Let's see. You also can't take on others' reactions to you because it's usually triggering something in you. You can only control how you feel.
Exactly.
And so Bruce said, I believe our emotions are likely to pressure us when stressed to judge before we fully understand. And so my mom added, oh, where'd it go? Added this. This was a label my sister got, boy beater. And so she was known for beating up the boys because she didn't take any shit.
I love it. I love how much Stephanie identifies with her spirituality. My identity is founded in the fact that I am God's daughter. This is something that will never change. So it's like Maria is saying, I am Stardust, right? So to Stephanie, that's who she is.
Yep.
But other aspects of myself can change, but not that one.
Yeah, great piece in this. And so, but ultimately is that, if we go back to what it is we were saying is, who would you be without that identity or that label?
Mm-hmm.
Would you still be Stephanie? Would you still be, ultimately, when you think about yourself as being God's daughter, what does that really encompass?
Mm-hmm.
From me, my experience with you has been that you're a very beautiful spirit, that you're very kind. Isn't that really, a lot of those defining labels that are a part of you being that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought you were just so into what you were saying that you didn't highlight comments. That's so funny.
We were like just going, but literally we didn't see them. It's the first time we didn't see any of them. So
I know. And so someone said, I think the comments platform through Facebook isn't working properly. So, yep. And the best part of that song, I do not feel ashamed. Yes. So, well, I'm sorry that we, but I liked sort of like going through and recapping all of the thoughts.
Yeah. We can always do that if it ever gets too intense. But we really appreciate you guys today and glad that you were here and able to engage. And thank you for sharing with us some of your labels and your thoughts and where it's coming from. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. I love this show, and we hope that you'll come next week because we're going to be celebrating 1 year anniversary of BOYBAS, and we also will have some special guests. So we'll be coordinating that. We have some people joining us, and then we also have some people that have sent us videos, and we're going to be talking about that. We've also posed some questions to you. We want to understand, what do you want year 2 to be? What do you want? Is there someone you want to come back? We want to learn more about who was your favorite. What were some of your favorite topics? What would you change? What do you want to see more of? So those are all the questions we have for you.
Yeah. I want to know, like, one time you said this and I want you to dig in and tell us more or whatever. I want to hear what that person's up to now, or, so much can change in a year.
Yes. And then the week after we have Matt, I think it's Oli. And he's going to be talking about toxic masculinity and basically recovering from it. And so he's a beautiful spirit, and I love his journey and the things that he has gone through. And then we're going to be talking about the rise of hate and how to heal with Pardeep Kalik. And so if you haven't heard his story, it's quite amazing. And I'm really looking forward to having both of these guests.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Matt. I love when men take on the topic of toxic masculinity. It's so cool. And then Pardeep, his family, his father was a victim of a mass shooting here in Wisconsin, a hate-based mass shooting. So you will not want to miss that one. He is full of love and light. So I see Stephanie said she wants to see more Jenna. Jenna.
Oh, wait. Oh, is that what she was saying? She wants more Jenna. All right. Sounds good. That's awesome. Well, Cate, thank you for a really great conversation. This is what you and I do, even when we're not on screen. So I love it.
I love it too. This was awesome. I really appreciate it as well. Very thought-provoking. Love that we have a safe space for each other to get uncomfy at times and are willing to do it publicly. So I appreciate you.
Well, being uncomfortable is growing, isn't it?
It sure is. Ugh.
Oh. All right. Well, everybody have a badass Friday and have an amazing weekend. And we hope that today's conversation helped you to really think on the labels that you assign yourself and assign others, and focus more on how we can continue to lift each other up, give love, give kindness. That's really what it's about.
Yep. Being a badass is all about making those little steps at times. So let's go out there and do it.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.